Well, welcome back to our next edition of What's Up America with Mike Cara. As always, proudly broadcasting from Ocoee, Florida, USA, planet Earth. And my next guest is Mitchel Evan, who is a great singer, songwriter, musician, performer. He has a self-titled album record called Mitchel Evan, and we're so blessed and honored to have Mitchel here today to tell us all about his music. And first of all, Mitchel, we understand that you've got a new album and new songs. And could you tell us about that?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Mike. Yes, my name is Mitchel Evan. I am a singer-songwriter, born and raised and currently based out of Richmond, Virginia. And my newest record is my self-titled album. It was released officially March 19th on all streaming platforms and is currently available on CD and vinyl. And the first three singles from the album were released in the 3 months leading up to March. So that's where we're at.
Okay. We want to talk a little bit about, your history of music. And can you tell us a little bit about, your background and where you think your love and passion for music comes from?
Sure. Yeah. So like I said, I grew up in Richmond, in the West End of Richmond, Virginia. Pretty standard middle class, white American household. I was the youngest of three siblings, and me and my brother and sister all did musical theater growing up. So that was my first introduction to the performing arts, was musical theater when I was about 6 or 7, and I started playing piano around the same time. But I was the furthest thing from a child prodigy. I mean, it's not that I was terrible, but I just didn't really care for the piano too much. I practiced once a week and I had lessons once a week, and it was mostly encouraged by my parents. But eventually I would circle back and come to fall in love with the piano on my own terms later in life. But yeah, so I started with musical theater very young. I enjoyed that a lot. It was a big part of my social life, when I was very young in elementary school as well. And then I got into choir when I was in middle school, and I did choir and chorus all the way through middle school and high school, and continued to do musical theater a little bit less as I got into high school. And but I picked up my first guitar when I was 12. Around the same time I started skateboarding. And so my interests became skateboarding and punk rock music, really. My first favorite band was Green Day when I was 13. And I was really into like alternative music and the Warped Tour scene. And yeah, so the first band I played in was a band called Bexley, a pop punk band out of Richmond. And I could hardly play the guitar, and I mostly sang in the band, and we were just a bunch of kids. I was 13 through 15, but we went on tour and we played a lot of shows, and we made a couple EPs all before I was the age of 15. And then I played in various other groups in high school, ranging from psychedelic rock to punk rock to kind of just those. And then I was all the while writing acoustic songs for myself. And if I could locate one definitive singular moment that made me want to be a singer-songwriter specifically, was when I was 14. I came across the movie Once. It was an independent Irish film starring Glenn Hansard and Markita Erglova, and the soundtrack, or the original score for the movie, was also written by those two, primarily by Glenn Hansard. And I'm not sure how I found the film, and it's not like I was a connoisseur of indie art films when I was 14, you know. I just came across it and I loved everything about it. I loved the busking. I loved the conviction in his voice. And I fell in love with his music. And I dragged my mom to see him in concert at a venue called Toad's Place that's no longer there now in Richmond. And he opened up the show with his song Say It To Me Now, which opens up the film as well. And he was standing at the front of the stage. His guitar was unplugged and he was not singing into a mic. And it was a 2,500 person theater. Nothing was mic'd. Everything was totally acoustic. And you could hear his voice bellowing through this giant theater. And you could hear a pin drop in the room. Everyone was transfixed on this person. And that is what blew my 14-year-old mind. And from that moment, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And I've done that ever since.
Oh, okay. So Mitchell, now we want to talk a little bit about, your process and, you about, how you write songs. So, I mean, is there a certain way, is there certain things that inspire you? Or, I mean, is there certain things that get you excited about songwriting or?
Yeah. I mean, songwriting is one of my favorite topics to talk about. I love it. I consider myself a writer more than anything else. And I primarily write songs, but I also write short stories and poems and prose. And I've been a journalist before. So songs are one of the things that I write. And I love writing songs. I like the brevity of songs. I like how concise they are. To me, there's a magic in coupling a melodic line with a lyrical line, and when they fit just right, there's nothing quite like that feeling. And I think out of performing, on stage and in the studio and writing, out of those three camps, writing has to be the most important to me and what I value more than anything else. I think that moment when I'm like deep in the throes of a brand new song and I'm on the second line in the second verse and it has all the momentum and I'm in between that second line and the third line and nothing else matters and time has stopped, that is the moment and the feeling that I have continued to chase for almost 15 years now. And I'm consistently, encouraged and to do it more and fall in love with it all over again. So I'm inspired by everything. I'm inspired by my life, by the people in it, the various different media that I consume, whether that's radio or film, other songs, romantic relationships, social problems, I've written about a lot of things. A few reoccurring themes that continue to present themselves in my work are love, loss, grief, addiction, those are probably the biggest themes. Sometimes I'll talk about the environment. Sometimes I'll talk about, I'm not a very politically minded person, so I don't speak about politics very much in my music, but I do sing about social issues sometimes.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, now the question I want to ask you, Mitchell, and I'm sure you get this kind of question, and how do you describe, your music? I mean, what do you tell people when they say, "Hey, Mitchell, what's your music all about here?"
Well, genre wise, I suppose we fall into the Americana camp, and I'm okay with that. You know, that's what people are calling it nowadays. But I do think it's interesting and important to note that the term Americana didn't mean anything except for a breed of chicken until 10 years ago, you know? So what we're calling Americana now is an umbrella that encompasses a lot of different styles of American music. Um, I'm an American artist and I'm an American writer, and I am proud to be a part of that lineage. So Americana, I have no qualms with. And I think that everything I'm playing is in some form or another a American roots style of music. It's inspired by the blues or folk or country or bluegrass or uh yeah, you know, those various different styles. But sometimes it's rock and roll, sometimes it's indie rock, but yeah, I think it's all Americana more or less.
Okay, so I mean, for you, then you mentioned about the idea of poems. I mean, is that what some of your songs are based on? Is poems or?
It's a good question. Yeah, I enjoy that question because a lot of times you'll hear people say your lyrics are like poetry, or um yeah, you hear people describe lyrics as poetry often when they like them and when they think that they're very poetic, I suppose. But to me personally, poetry and lyric writing are two very different, very separate disciplines. um if I read you one of my poems, um, it'd be a very different experience than reading my lyrics. My poetry is much more abstract. Um, it can be more abrasive. It can be more vulgar, uh, and just less linear. I think my poetry is free form, so it doesn't rely on rhyming very often or hardly at all. Whereas when I'm lyric writing, I am relying very heavily on rhyming. And you know, almost all of my lyrics do rhyme in some way or another. So uh the discipline of writing poetry and writing lyrics or songs are two separate things to me, and it's hardly ever that I start with a poem and then turn that into lyrics, because my poetry is not very lyrical.
Oh, okay. So now, Mitchell, you know, you were nice enough to send some songs, and I know our audience has been listening to these great songs. And if you don't mind telling us a little bit about them, maybe a backstory or a memory or something about them. Let's see. So the first song we have here is "Let Me Down Easy." Can you tell us about this one?
Sure, yeah. I'm glad that I sent you three different ones from the singles. um Let Me Down Easy is one of my favorites off of the album. It's I think we achieved a really solid production of the recording of that song. It's a rock and roll song. It's kind of Tom Petty inspired. It lyrically, the song is about recovering from trauma and a very difficult period in your life, and kind of just pleading to the universe to be treated gently and with care, you know, like as if I'm a package, you know, handle with care kind of thing. And that's what that phrase "let me down easy" is referring to.
Okay, and now let's see here. Gotta Be Away. Can you tell us about this one?
Sure, yeah, "Gotta Be Away" is it's a song about hope, really. It's the refrain is there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way. I'm trying to think of the lyrics now, actually. The song starts off, my phone is pretty quiet these days. My email is all full of junk. My mind is pretty noisy these days. It don't do it justice to call it a funk. And that song is just kind of about the difficult quiet period that followed a very difficult loud traumatic experience for me. I had just moved back from Colorado to Virginia, and that's the period that I was referring to. I had just moved to a new town again. It was where I was from, but I hadn't lived here in a long time, and I felt very isolated. I felt very alone. So loneliness is a big theme in the song, and but so there's despair in the song, but there's also hope. There's recognizing that the despair is what I'm feeling right now, but I know that it won't last forever. I know that this will pass. And sometimes we can't always see that, and that's where the real darkness comes in, is when you start to believe the lie that this is forever, that this will never go away. And that's when people, unfortunately, do horrendous things like take their own lives, is when we can't see the hope. So this song is about seeing the hope.
Oh, okay. And now another song we have here is Work of Art. Could you tell us about this one?
Yeah, work of art. I wrote, it's one of the older songs on the album. I wrote it prior to moving back to Virginia from Colorado. When I was living in Colorado, I did several tours through the Western United States, solo acoustic tours. And I wrote Work of Art when I was in the middle of, or actually towards the end of one of those tours. It was a 30-day stretch. I was out by myself. I think I drove like 3,000 miles or something, which is basically the length of the country. But I was doing a giant circle from Denver down to San Diego and all the way up the coast to Sacramento and Salt Lake City. And I was seeing someone at the time, and I was falling madly in love with them. And I missed them a lot on this trip. And I was feeling a whole range of emotions. I was feeling lonely, sexually frustrated, in love. I was feeling excited, but I was feeling isolated and alone. It's kind of a mess of emotions, but it's a kind of fun, happy song.
Okay, so those are, some of the songs. So are all those songs then the one on this new album then?
They are, yeah. Let Me Down Easy. He's on side A, and the other two are on side B.
Okay, and speaking of work of art, we understand, Mitchell, that you also, are an artist and you do a certain artwork. So, I mean, is that something else that kind of is all tied together with the music and the poems and that?
Yes. I am a visual artist. I don't make visual art as much as I would like to, or as often as I could. I did it a lot more when I was younger. When I was younger, I did a whole lot of different disciplines simultaneously, and I still do, but just not as often. So, for example, the most visual art that I've done recently was for the single covers for a few of the songs. So I drew my own cover art for Cancel Out the Noise and Leeches, and I think that's it. Was there a third one? Oh, and Band-Aid. Yeah. So I did the cover art for those three. And I really enjoyed that. They are connected in that way. I'm illustrating the song, and I I like being an illustrator. You know, I don't think that I'm necessarily good enough to be a fine artist to hang stuff in galleries or anything like that. But I am I am good enough to be an illustrator, and I love cartoons, so I do a lot of cartooning. And someday I'd like to write a children's book and maybe write some comic books or something like that. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm into art wise.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. So yeah, there's a lot of things like you mentioned about comic books and things that you hopefully will do sometime in the future then, huh?
Right. Yeah. And so for your listeners that are interested in supporting me, I just launched a Patreon lately. If you don't know what Patreon is, it's a platform where you can basically make a voluntary subscription, a monthly subscription to an artist or a creator of your choosing, and where you kick in $5 or $10 a month. And that money, instead of going to fund a particular project, just goes to fund that artist in general so that they can continue creating new stuff. And it's not just giving it away. This subscription comes with perks. It comes to access to exclusive content that's not available to the public. So it's a pretty good deal. And by subscribing to my Patreon page, you can get access to a lot of great stuff that no one else has seen, unreleased demos, and there's a lot of them. Physical prints of my visual art, like we talked about, handwritten lyrics. I'll play a private concert for you, stuff like that. So the Patreon is great because while music is my primary endeavor, there are obviously these other artistic and creative mediums that I use, and the Patreon allows me to fund those projects and to share those projects with people.
Okay, so how does that work again, Mitchell? That people will make donations monthly, or there's certain levels, or how does that work?
Right. So instead of making a donation monthly, you subscribe to the channel. So you'll put in your information, and the donation is made automatically monthly. So it's just like a subscription to Spotify or YouTube Premium or Netflix or anything like that. And yes, there are different tiers. So I need to pull it up to look at the exact tiers, but there's different tiers that come with different levels of rewards, and they cost different amounts. So for $5, that's my official Patreon. The lowest access is $5 a month. For $10 a month, that's the all access patron. It comes with behind the scenes content, live streams, exclusive content of behind the scenes process, like photos of me at work, writing songs, poetry, working on visual art, time-lapse videos. And then for $30 a month, that is the highest VIP tier. And that's the one that to me really makes the whole thing worth it. It comes with early access to updates, ticket releases, more behind the scenes content, patron only polls, private concerts with just me and you, monthly, scratch tracks and demos from albums and other songs that didn't make it onto record. So there's a lot of really great perks, and only more to come. And like I said, I just launched it a couple weeks ago, so a lot of the details are still being ironed out, and the different tiers will only get better and better and have more to offer as time goes on. So you can check that out at patreon.com/Mitchel Evan Music. That's Mitchell with one L, Evan no S.
Okay, and now, Mitchell, as far as your performances are going, I mean, are you able to get back performing in person, or is a lot of this still virtual business? Or
Yeah, I'm back at it, man. I'm working as hard as ever, and my calendar is filling up fast. I've got 10 gigs this month in May, and June is filling up fast, and July and August, and I'm planning to actually do a European tour in September. So that's this is the first time I'm officially announcing that, and I'm going to be touring a little bit more of the Mid-Atlantic and the American Southeast mid to late summer.
wow, a European tour. I mean, do you have the countries already selected, or I mean, is there certain countries you want to hit during the tour? Or
It's still kind of up in the air right now as we iron out the details for travel and dates, and look at what gigs are available. So the booking will determine a lot of the travel, but right now we're thinking mostly, if not entirely, the UK. And if we do make it to mainland Europe, I'm particularly interested in Norway and Denmark.
oh, okay. And do you have any plans of coming to Orlando, Florida anytime soon?
Um, it's a little bit further south than I usually tend to go. But with that being said, I love Florida, and I've been a few times in the past. So all I can say at this time is I certainly hope so.
Okay, Mitchell. So now, as far as your website site and social media. So first of all, do you have a website?
Yeah, of course. www.mitchelevanmusic.com. That's Mitchell with one L, Mitchel, and Evan, Evan, no S, music.com.
And as far as your social media goes, do you are you on like just about like Twitter and Facebook and all that?
You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Mitchel Evan Music, and on Twitter at Mitchel Evan Muse, Muse. You can find me on PayPal at Mitchel Evan if you just want to send me a donation. And you can find me on all of the major streaming platforms.
Okay, now as far as if people would like to purchase this album and support you, is the best way to get it on your website, or can you get it on all the streaming sites? Or
You can get it on all the streaming sites, and if you want to buy it directly for digital download, or buy a hard copy CD, digital download, the best bet is to go to mitchelevan.bandcamp.com, where you'll have access to all of my releases, and you can pay for them individually or buy the discography for like $35, which is like 7 albums. Or you can pay me directly again on PayPal at Mitchel Evan. And I think that's paypal.me/Mitchel Evan if you want the URL. And you can send me $20 for a CD or $30 for a vinyl, and just put in the notes what it's for and your address or your email address, and I'll send it directly to your door.
okay, Mitchell. So I want to ask you a question, if you don't mind. First of all, I think it's great that you've got vinyl. I mean, that's awesome. I remember vinyl, but what is it about vinyl that attracts to you? What is it that we get so excited about vinyl for?
I think there's a few different reasons. I think that, for one, people really like artwork. Cover art is important. It's the biggest and most substantial way to see cover art, right? You get to hold it. It's like the size of a painting. It's extremely satisfying to hold that and to look at it. there's a tangible nature to opening up a record, putting it on the turntable, putting the needle into the groove, pressing play. I don't think that there's any fidelity advantages. Some people argue that there is, but there is a warmth and a crackling that people seem to enjoy on records, and I just think that there's an intentionality to it, which is the biggest thing that will never become obsolete regardless of technology, and that true music fans will always be attracted to. To be honest, Mike, one of my favorite mediums to listen on is cassette, just because I love the packaging. I love the size of them. I love the way that they sound. I think that cassettes sound terrific. I have a Nick Cave cassette upstairs and it sounds amazing, So we all have our different things and they all are valid, they all have a place, I think, and it's fun to make different stuff.
Okay, Mitchell. Well, okay, before we go now, I want to ask you if you are currently writing a new, I know you just got this new album, but I mean, is there any process or any sort of progress on a new album or at least writing new music or?
Absolutely. Yeah. I write all the time. I don't write 4 records and then stop writing and then write again when it's time to make a new record. I write all the time. I probably average around 60 songs a year. And, over the past year during the lockdown, the pandemic lockdown, I demoed over 50 songs. So there's 3 records that I want to make in 2021 if I can afford them. One is a solo acoustic record, one is a solo full band record, and one is a album with a new project that I'm starting with my partner called M and Me.
Okay, Mitchell. Well, that all sounds great, and we wish you the best. Any final thoughts or anything else you'd like to mention here?
I don't think so. Thank you for having me, Mike. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I hope that your community of listeners enjoy this.
Okay, and if you could give your website one final time, please.
That's www.mitchelevanmusic.com.
Okay, thanks so much. My guest has been Mitchel Evan, and you've been listening to What's Up America with Mike Cara. And please catch us again next time.
See you, Mike.